Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, as a follow-up to this video right here, which got a lot of comments, and I thank all of you for that, we've kind of really started this discussion about red flag laws. And yes, listen, I'll get it out of the way. I have made controversial statements about red flag laws, which is, as a former prosecutor and then as somebody who has defended people on extreme risk protection orders, I do believe, in fact, that the purpose of these laws are noble and that the people who oftentimes propose them actually have their hearts in the right place. That being said, before you all start freaking out, once we actually start applying these laws, though, that's when they completely break down, because to suggest that a person's constitutional rights are thwarted would be a gross understatement of what actually happens. It is a complete evisceration of multiple constitutional rights in the way that we implement red flag laws now. We're going to talk about the state of Michigan because they just implemented their red flag laws. They did so without talking to law enforcement. Now law enforcement is a little skeptical about what they may have to do. And that should actually caution all of us and make us, once again, let's do a little soul searching here. So today, let's spend a few minutes and talk about yet another reason why we need to rethink red flag laws. Okay, so what we're talking about today is the state of Michigan, which just passed its version of extreme risk protection orders, red flag laws, which went into effect October 1st of this year. Now, obviously, Governor Gretchen Whitmer was more than happy to sign these laws because anything that advances the cause of civilian disarmament will, of course, be met with great favor by that governor. However, what drew my attention to this whole thing wasn't the big gun grab that was going on in Michigan. It was rather a lot of the concern that was coming out from law enforcement. These are actually law enforcement agencies in the state of Michigan. One of their big concerns is that, hey, during this whole process that you guys were kicking this legislation around, we asked multiple times to have some input, to give you some guidance from a law enforcement perspective, since, you know, we're the ones that are going to have to go out and execute these orders. And nobody in the Michigan State Legislature, shockingly, ever consulted with law enforcement. As a matter of fact, there have been multiple articles on multiple news sources, which we will link up down below, in which individuals associated with Michigan law enforcement, including Robert Stevenson, who is the head of the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, he was quoted about some of the very obvious inherent dangers that law enforcement is going to have when executing these orders. He was quoted as saying, "While I support the law, I do not believe people who are not mentally balanced should have firearms. I worry about the safety of the officers who will be taking the guns away." And you need to understand that this is a legitimate concern, because what many people don't understand about how red flag laws are executed is one person will go to a court, make allegations. Granted, the allegations may be true. The allegations may be completely fabricated. They will put them down on paper. They may raise their right hand and say to the judge, yes, I'm telling you under penalty of perjury that everything on the paper there is true and correct. That's about it. There's no cross-examination. It's not like the respondent, the person who's going to have their gun stripped from them, is notified, hey, we're having this hearing on you. And if the court determines that there is justification for a red flag order, which is only by a preponderance of evidence standard. Okay, so it's a preponderance of evidence standard with only one side being heard by the court and no opportunity to attack the credibility or the weight of that evidence. If the court then signs an order, that order is served upon law enforcement and is ordered to go out to the individual's home and get the guns right now. So suddenly you have an individual who may be mentally unstable, may be going through some type of emotional trauma at the time, who now has law enforcement show up unannounced at his home, suggesting that they got a court order and that he needs to turn the firearms over immediately. And we can all see then what one of the very obvious end outcomes could be to this type of situation. In fact, Mr. Stevenson was also quoted as saying, if you have somebody who says that they're paranoid and they're dangerous and they've got firearms, and somebody gets an order that tells this person you need to turn in your firearm, who's going to go to this house with the dangerous psychotic person that's paranoid and try to take their guns from them? In what way is that going to happen? And then, of course, he points to the obvious horrible optics that could likely occur with these types of law, which includes, what happens if the person with the order tries to hurt the officers? What if the person who was deemed suicidal becomes overwhelmed and still poses harm to themselves when their guns are being seized? What if the individual with an order has to be detained by force or even be killed due to the threat they pose? I mean, you have to imagine the optics are terrible, right? We are trying to save somebody in the family. We went to the police to save them and they killed them. And unfortunately, that is a real possibility because this is exactly how red flag orders are carried out. Now, this concern was raised by some legislators, but Senator Mallory McMorrow, a Democrat also from the state of Massachusetts, said, according to a report that was given at the time the legislation was being kicked around, I've studied the laws in other states such as California and Florida, and I found no instances of a gun being fired during a seizure of weapons. Well, that's great, Senator, that you took a look at California and Florida. Reminder, there are 48 other states in the union. And of course, many people may recall the 2018 incident involving Patrick Willis in Maryland, who, when officers went to seize his firearms pursuant to a red flag order, Mr. Willis apparently reached for one of the firearms. He was then fired upon by officers and killed. And again, what's really most offensive is this is a law which is not only designed to strip individuals of what is supposed to be inalienable rights under a standard much less than proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but also places thousands and thousands of Michigan law enforcement officers in harm's way, perhaps unnecessarily. Matt Saxton, who is the executive director of the Michigan Sheriff's Association, asked multiple times to be involved in the legislative process. He was met with essentially a closed door every turn he made. He was quoted in another article as saying, I asked multiple times to be part of the enforcement process with the governor's office, but was instead left in the dark, not sure what to strategize for and what to envision when it takes effect. So the bottom line is this, I do believe that there is a very small segment of the population who may have access to firearms lawfully, where that access does in fact pose a threat to community safety, whether it's themselves or others, due to their ongoing mental conditions. I understand why we have red flag laws, but the problem is that the execution of these laws do not even come remotely close to passing constitutional muster. And then when we go back and we see how this legislation is created, why this legislation is created, and who's kept out of the decision-making process, it should give all of us a pause and ask all of us to seriously do a little soul searching and let's rethink the legitimacy of red flag laws. Listen, if you got any more questions about this or anything else related to what's left of your Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information, it's down in the description box. Also, in the meantime, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.